a few to choose from. I think what we got here. Yeah. Can you see the presentation?
I see PowerPoint. Yep, looks good.
There we go. All right, fantastic. Okay, so we'll get started here. For those, let me turn this off, give subtitles a try. No thanks. So for those that are new to the hackathon, welcome. Today is a bit of a repeat of a training session we did 3 or 4 weeks back. I think it's been actually a month. And the idea here is we're going to go through a few different phases. The combination of SunCog, City of Detroit, and their content offerings, and then here location services and mapping capabilities will hopefully lend itself to you all developing these use cases, and whether they be applications or just ideas that that you manifest and leverage some of the tools. I don't think there's a wrong answer. What we want to accomplish today for those who have not yet is give you a path and some instructions on how to create a here limited plan account, which is free to you. Excuse me, there's no credit card required. Going to walk through that process real quickly. All of the documentation that we're sharing today has already been shared and is posted up on DevPost under resources. So you'll see links to these presentations. You'll also see a recording from the previous training session. So the intention today is to go a bit more quickly to allow a little more interaction, maybe some Q&A for those that have been digging in, but I don't want to exclude those that are brand new to this. So we'll give you some exposure, how to create an account, go through some of our location services, the capabilities, share some demo links that will be available to you once you do create a here account, which can be advantageous for examples, stirring the thought process, as well as even deriving code from to accelerate what you may end up building. So that's kind of the flyby, and we'll actually hit some of those demos as well, not just expose them to you. So we'll try to be fairly expeditious and allow time for questions as we go. So without further ado, step one is really to go through the process of creating a here account. It's a fairly straightforward process. As you can see, the link here, if you were to go to developer.here.com, incidentally, platform.here.com would also facilitate the same thing. And you select pricing at the top of the screen where you see the big red arrow. And that's effectively going to take you to base plan versus limited plan. And our guidance here is to take advantage of the limited plan, which again is going to give you a freemium tier of transactions against these location services that we're going to share with you. And again, no credit card required during the registration at all. So it's really a bit of an a la carte and a great opportunity to get you used to this. And I think the question was raised last time, or may have come up after the session. You know, once you create this account, it's not going to go away at the end of the hackathon. So feel free to continue to dig in and use it for your endeavors any way you see fit. The limited plan, again, it allows for 1,000 free daily transactions, and that will be on a excuse me, per individual basis. So if you have a team of 3 or 4 people, you can certainly divide and conquer and maximize the experience. The Here Maps API for JavaScript's included. Our location services are included. Let's move on quickly. When you do go to create the account, you'll see what the fields look like here. Ultimately, it's going to send a verification email to the email you populated. You can either activate or verify via straight out of the email, a link that's provided, or just a copy and paste back into to this page, and you're off to the races. Ultimately, you'll also need to set your password. You do need to say what country you're in, agree to the terms and conditions. You'll skip the billing and get started with the Here platform. This is the splash page you'll see once you're logged in. And we won't get into to this a whole bunch, but it gives you an idea that, hey, you've arrived and you're in business to move forward. What I do recommend is, as you see the red arrow, again, this documentation will be shared. So if you don't catch it now, that's fine. See all documentation, and that's going to take you here. So in terms of our location services, this is a wealth of resource in terms of developer guides and information against all of the services that are going to be at your disposal. With that said, there are some services listed here that you won't have access to. And again, I don't think, like, for example, matrix routing, that's really a transportation logistics use case driven API. Unlikely that it's going to apply here, but at the freemium level, there are a couple exceptions. But by and large, what you need to and to get at, you will be able to. And we're going to cover some of that here shortly. So that is it for presentation number 1. I will take a quick pause and see if there are any questions. And just a reminder, this slideshow with the links is posted up on the dev post share for the hackathon. All right, moving forward. We're going to touch on location services. There's a lot of information here. And again, jump in if there are questions as we go. That's probably the best. And if you're more comfortable waiting until later, that's fine as well. So we will dive in. What here location services are, effectively, it's a rich set of APIs, or application programming interfaces, focused on applying location intelligence to many use cases and solving business problems. I won't read all of the verbiage here, and we'll give you a half a second to look. But the notion of the HERE platform is a collection of basically the leading map on the planet, particularly as it relates to solving location-related business problems. It's also a collection of services that work against those or with those maps and the attributes of the maps to provide intelligence and capabilities. At the highest level, that's probably the best way to put it. HERE has what we like to call a real world index. So think of the center of our world, or is really the content, the map, the attributions thereof. And surrounding that, or the perimeter thereof, are ways to access or extrapolate that information in a meaningful way, and potentially a way to combine these capabilities and services to deliver against use cases. So for example, real-time traffic. If you're trying to navigate from point A to point B, you can see where traffic might be a big influencer. It might tell you how long to plan for. It might also advise you when is the best time. So it's all about context. Map rendering is something we'll get into a little bit here as well. You can, as an output, right? If you can't visualize the information, it becomes very tough to communicate. So at the highest level, that's really what the capability of map rendering is going to do for you. Geocoding and search, if you're looking for points of interest, that API comes into those capabilities. If you're trying to find out in the world of geospatial information, you'll hear the references of latitude and longitude, or lat long. If you have an address, let's say 12345 Main Street, Chicago, Illinois, this service will transpose that into those geo coordinates, or the lat long coordinate, and even potentially reverse. So let's say you happen to have coordinates, but you want to snap that to an address or convert that to an address. Reverse geocoding does that as well. All of these services have a lot of granularity and a lot of toggles and ways to get different information out of them. So we're reviewing them at a high level, and you'll probably hear me say it 20 times and get sick of it, but the reference documentation and developer guides for these APIs is a good place to dig, and even start to spur the creative process and use cases that you might be finding yourself going towards in terms of this hackathon, and again, beyond the hackathon. Routing is a fundamental. I'm not going to hit on all these right now, but point A to point B, our routing capabilities extend beyond just basic routing. We'll talk later and even do a demonstration a little bit on the basics of routing, potentially Iceline routing, which based on time or distance gives you a sense of how far of a reach you have. And we'll go from there. So jumping into the individual products, we'll certainly start with routing. It is a suite of capabilities, right? So multiple endpoints, if you will. for basic routing, and again, multimodal, right? So it could be vehicles, it could be walking, it could be trucks, bicycles, etc. You get the idea. What's important to understand here, though, is it applies to the mode of transportation, but it also potentially brings in trucks, for example. Trucks can't drive on every street. There's rules and regulations that apply, so those get factored into the intelligence of the service capability. Iceline routing, touched on a little bit. We'll do a demo, but I personally think this is one capability that will find its way into a lot of these presentations and ideas. Route matching is another capability, and it might or might not come into play here, but the notion is to have a set of GPS traces, right, along, let's say, a vehicle, or even you're walking with your phone and happen to capture lat longs along a certain path that has been taken. What route matching does is ingest those GPS coordinates and says, hey, this is almost certainly the path that was taken as it relates to a navigable map. So that's what it does for you, in addition to the potential to, and we'll get into our map attributes API, but being able to call attributes against that route as well. So along the way, what are things that might be relevant, whether it's in the world I live in, which is very focused in to automotive. When you talk about ADAS and autonomous driving, it might pull slope, elevation, curvature of the roadway, etc. So just very high level examples of what that endpoint can do. Waypoint sequencing, I'm not sure that's more of a transportation logistics use case, but let's say, I'm going to use the traveling salesman analogy, but an individual has 10 places to go through the course of the day, and it doesn't really matter in what order they do it. They just want to do it efficiently. What that capability does is plot them out in the most efficient way possible, given the parameters that have been set forth. And matrix routing, it is not available to the limited plan account, probably not applicable for these use cases, but again, very much a transportation logistics sort of capability where you can have one-to-many destinations, many-to-many destinations, et cetera, and effectively kind of chart that out, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. So we've really kind of talked to this a little bit more detail, and I think this is an example where I'm just going to move through it. You can reference this and or the previous recording. Again, I want to be sensitive and try to allow for question and answer time. In fact, I'll just stop real quick. Any questions so far? And again, please don't be shy. If anything pops up or you're scratching your head, there are no bad questions. Okay, we'll move on. So the Iceline routing API, which again, we're going to demonstrate that towards the end of our hour here. It can be triggered off of time. So in other words, an area that can be reached within a given period of time. And that also relates to mode of transportation. So that time, for example, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, if you're walking, your path, if you will, or how far you can go will certainly be far less than if you were driving a car. And as previously noted, in terms of routing capabilities, if you are traveling with the truck, certain restrictions will apply, and also potentially limit where you can navigate, which could potentially have influence on the distance you can travel and how you travel. So again, that's time driven. You can also do it or trigger it based on distance, right? An area that can be reached from traveling no more than a given distance. And you see some examples there of some polylines that are created, and we'll see that in the real world demo here shortly. Oops. All right, jumping through. So here are map attributes, and I touched on that a little bit, but effectively it's a RESTful API service that allows you to call attribution against the map. Here has more than 1,000 different attributes that we map. So depending on the use case, and we're going to dig into kind of what we call layers, and within layers attribution that map to it. So as we break out a map, you've effectively got tiles. Within tiles, you've got a layered schema. Within each of those layers, you've got given attributions. So rather than overwhelming you with over 1,000 attributes, depending on your use case, you may target a certain layer, and within that layer, given attribution. We talked about, curvature, et cetera, but traffic lights, that may be, fundamental to some of the urban use cases you guys might be looking at. truck speed limits, road inclines, etc. The list goes on, and we'll dive in a little bit more, but conceptual in nature. I just want you to know what the map attributes API is all about. And as you make calls, for example, if you're, let's say you're leveraging route matching for a set of GPS coordinates, that same call can be constructed to pull given attributes along with it. So in other words, you're kind of piggybacking on the API call to leverage multiple endpoints and capabilities. That may or may not be something you get into. There's nuance to that I won't bore you with today, but just important to note that it's that combination of information and the location services that really start to pack a punch, if you will. So this speaks a little bit to data sets. We're going to focus on that left side in terms of that base package that will be exposed to you from link attribution. But I won't read the whole slides to you, but administrative polygon display, country, state, city, etc. Again, potentially very relevant for what you're looking to accomplish around the city of Detroit. Road geometry, road shape points, if you will. It's probably good, Jonathan, and always feel free to interject if you think there's something particularly relevant. I'm trying to keep some pace here, but at the same time, I don't want to go so fast that it's not meaningful.
No, I think you're spot on, Steve. I think I'll wait for any Q&A and we can dig more into that from there.
Sure. Sounds good. Here, map rendering. This is a topic I like to defer to Jonathan on, but as noted earlier, rendering or being able to visualize is really what kind of puts a rubber to the road, if you will. Without visualization, it just becomes a lot of data points that aren't particularly meaningful. And to that end, there are multiple ways to accomplish that and services that are available to you. With that, I'll queue up Jonathan to talk through this section a little bit.
Yes, thank you. So we have vector tiles, map tiles, and map API, image API, and all those very similar sounding names, right? So vector tiles is the way to convey these data sets through actual data, right? So it allows you to have a much smaller size. And there are a lot of open source as well as our JavaScript API tools that allow you to visualize those tiles. Map tiles and map image allow you to have these raster images out of it instead, so that you can simply display the output. I think for the sake of this hackathon, it very likely just be more on the right-hand side, leveraging our JavaScript API which generates and creates this map that end users are already used to, panning and toggling and zooming in and out, and all done pretty much out of the box. So it's likely that Maps API for JavaScript will be the best solution here to visualize a map and be able to interact with it easily with little development effort.
And there's a long list of demo resources that will be available to you, and they in fact leverage that same API. So you'll get a look and feel as you dive into it. So moving on, I don't know if you want to talk to this a little bit, Jonathan, in terms of client-side rendering, just piggybacking on the Maps API for JavaScript.
Correct. So the Maps API for JavaScript, again, allows you that flexibility, right, to be able to show the map. And here you can see a few examples on the left-hand side of overlaying an information box or polygons, and that's out of the box supported by the JavaScript API. So if you know a little bit of JavaScript, you'd be able to easily put these extra objects on top of the map.
Perfect. So what we call GS7, or our Geocoding and Search API, touched on it just a little bit earlier. It can be leveraged to convert addresses to geo coordinates or vice versa. It also allows searching for points of interest. And you'll find, a lot of the capabilities that are built and services and our applications that are built with our services combine these things, right? So you'll see this and routing integrated, right? So I want to be able to call out, whatever it is. I always use, Chicago Soldier Field as a point of interest, kind of as a starting point. But I want to be able to go there and be routed to there. And as simple as calling out the name. Hey, I know what this is. I got a match. I'm going to convert it to geo coordinates, and then my router is going to take those coordinates and ask me, hey, how do you plan on getting there? You walk in, you're riding a bicycle, you're driving a car, you're taking public transportation, and then provide the guidance thereof. So that's, and the point I'm making here is that's where a lot of the power comes from, is the combination of these services and the content. I'll also say, and I'm certain that SEMCOG and the city of Detroit, who are also partnering on this hackathon, I believe they both also provide geocoding capabilities. So the point being, you don't necessarily have to use here. You're more than welcome to. It's available to you. I'm going to go ahead and move through these. Again, feel free to dig into the developer guides in terms of some of the granular capabilities, but just know that this is a capability available to you, as is real-time traffic. And again, traffic aware routing is certainly, an important capability that our customers use on a daily basis, and again, available to you. So I'm going to move to this slide. We have a deeper product set, in like historical traffic going back for 5 years falls under the traffic analytics. That as a freemium tier, I don't see that being available to you, but the real-time traffic, which is going to cover flow data, incident data, if there's an accident, et cetera, potentially calling out a reroute, those are things that come into play, or how long it's going to take, right? So may or may not, have value for your particular use case as you kind of get creative through the process, but again, something else available to you. And the feature availability, I touched on it: flow data, incident data, or lane closures, reversible lanes, right? Depending on time of day, you'll find in more urban settings that, for the rush inbound, it's heading to the east. For the rush outbound, it's heading to the west, as well as traffic safety warnings. Destination weather is another RESTful API endpoint that can clearly have influence on travel times, et cetera, and inform decision making. Not going to get into this a whole lot, but it's, the name pretty much implies the capability, right? Where if you were putting in a destination, it's going to give you an idea of what the weather is, and even a shorter term forecast and some points along the way. So that can be some intelligence you could potentially build into your use case if you see fit. We talked a little bit about this, and I don't know if this is going to come into play or not for use cases, but it is available to you, a network positioning API, which effectively leverages Wi-Fi to help position where you're at. GPS isn't always reliable, particularly when you start thinking about urban canyons and between buildings where you might not have a whole lot of capability, but there's certainly a whole lot of Wi-Fi around. This is something that here has been building for a while, and we have an incredibly robust install base that allows for that accuracy to be determined. Not as accurate as a high definition GNSS capability, but in the absence of anything else, and it also dependent on the strength of the cell size, et cetera, but can provide some location capabilities. And it also is globally covered. So we're making good time, and I apologize if that felt pretty quick. That was by design. This was, I think we took a little bit longer the first time around, and that recording is available, but would like to, I'll pause for 1 second and see if anybody's got any questions on location services. And just a reminder that the links to the developer guides are a plethora of resource and information, and actually quite user-friendly to dig into. They're indexed and et cetera. So that would be a strong recommendation. All right, don't know if it looks like there's one question in the chat. Is that relevant to her last tutorial? Gotcha. Somebody's already been through it, and that's quite all right. Apparently didn't have any questions. So what we're going to cover, and again, this documentation is shared. Once you create your HERE account, you're going to have the opportunity to go to a page of demo resources, and these demos will be available to you. And as you'll see, as we're going to demonstrate, it also allows you to extrapolate code, right? So not only potentially, spur some creative use case thought process, but also you might find something that maps very closely to what you want to accomplish, and you can pull code out of it to get a big jump start. So we're going to look at that real quickly in terms of simple map when we get to the demonstrations. This in particular. We're also going to give you an example. I had talked about the route matching API and potentially pulling attribution against that. And this is a canned demo that does just that, right? So you see on the left side here, input a series of lat long traces, and then ultimately submit and asking for the output. So not only does it snap to what is the most likely route that was taken, but it's also going to highlight some ADAS and speed information along the route based on that trace. So kind of good information, and again, a seed for creativity or thought process around use case in terms of what attribution you might pull against a trace or a route. Also, this is, and we'll dig into this and dig into the layers, but you'll be able to access this in terms of our attribution, platform data extension attribution by layer, and within the layers, you'll see the attributes. So we'll dig into that. But again, this will be accessible to you once you create that limited plan. And last, but certainly not least, we're going to go through a bit of a routing demo. So we'll look at basic routing. And we'll also look at Iceline routing a little bit in terms of that stretch, if you will, based on time and or distance. But again, this is already posted on the Hackathon website. So feel free to dig into it, leverage these resources, all conditional on having created a HERE account. That login will provide you access to these resources. Okay. Let's jump into some demos here if we don't have any questions. The first link that was shared in that previous presentation takes you to this web page, and I'll just do a quick scroll down. We do have a question that just popped up in the chat. Are the demos linked off the developer site? I don't think so. Jonathan, are they?
The demos we're mentioning do not, but there are in the developer sites for each one of these APIs. There is typically a tab that says examples, and that example will give you some code excerpts, and not as interactive as these, but it's some code excerpts that show some examples of whether it's a call or how a certain layout was created.
Excellent. Thanks much. And again, you'll be able to get at all these. You don't have to, but certainly more than one way to skin a cat. And I'm going to scroll down here just to give you an idea of the quantities of demos and examples that are put forth, some common examples. And again, you can, permutate against these, but they're good opportunities to plant the seed, to let you learn a little bit about the content and the services, and even potentially extrapolate code from these demos. And we'll show you how to do that right here. So the very first one, actually, I'm going to go back. The very first one is just a simple map view. So if we go into that demo, and I'm actually I'll close this right now. Okay, so it just pulls up a simple map view. And the takeaway here is just within your simple browser, if you go to tools, depending on what browser you use, but ultimately you're looking to get at your developer tools. And what this does is it's going to expose some of the underlying code. So for simple maps, and I think, Jonathan, if I recall last time, we ended up going to examples. I think this is where we ended up going to actually be able to view the code that instantiates this map. So here it is, and it's all pretty exposed. And you can derive information. I think last time we took a look at the API key, right, which is exposed, and we talked a little bit about security. Now this is for a sort of transient example in the hackathon, but if you were to put some of these services into production, you'd want to rotate these keys because they become visible, and then you potentially have a security compromise. But the takeaway here is any of these demos that are going to run, and as mentioned earlier, leverage our Maps API for JavaScript, exposes the code for you. So you can certainly take advantage. Jonathan, you might have some wisdom to add on top of this, but this is a nice little shortcut.
Nope,
That
I
makes
think
it
you got it
better.
just right. This shows how to actually create the map, and if I want to just walk really quickly through it, the first line is about checking HTTPS. The second one is about setting that key, adding the layers, and then instantiating the map, and that's pretty much it, right? So that it's just a few lines of code, and then you get this very responsive map on the left-hand side that you can zoom, pan, and all that out of the box. And so there are other ones that are a little bit more complex, and you're able to actually see as well some of those code excerpts and understand how to create something more complex than this. But I think it's a good jumping off point.
Okay. Any questions before we take a look at the next one? Okay. And again, these are just examples. I mean, there were literally dozens, available to you here, but calling out some examples that we think might be pertinent and maybe convey the concepts. So in this RME or route match extension, we kind of hit on this a few times. If you were to have a GPS trace and you want to determine, okay, what was actually the navigation path that was taken, or with a very high degree of confidence, and oh, by the way, I want to pull some ADAS scenario attributes and speed information against that trace. And for those that don't know, advanced driver assistance system, right? That's what ADAS stands for. So, and again, not going to be relevant to this project, but I don't want to just assume the acronym is known. So if and a lot of these demos are canned, right? They'll have examples provided for you. Or you could even input a trace yourself. So again, it doesn't mean you have to use these, but we'll, for the sake of time and simplicity, we'll select the Sheffield Commerce separated value, right? And what you'll see here is a series of lat long traces, right? So it goes out and it says, okay, what was the path in terms of the navigable roadway that was taken based on these traces? Because GPS, we know, is typically off a little bit here and there. So some of these individual points, they may have been off 5, 10, 50 meters, but those one-offs either are going to be discarded or it's going to be aligned based on the previous, point and then the next point, right? It clearly didn't, jump off the road 50 meters and drive through a field. But at the same time, let me stretch this out a little bit. This gives you the response to the API call, but it's also going to call out attribution. So if we expand this a little bit, you'll start to see, I can highlight something here, or at least try to. This doesn't always play nice for me. I'm going to go back to stretch it out. There we go. So it's painting it again. I always have a tendency to, and Jonathan, maybe a little help here, right? Because if I click on something, it tends to, I want to highlight the attribution without changing the display.
Sorry, I missed the question.
No, I'm just trying to show the feedback on.
Let me share my screen really quickly.
Yeah, because
then
I thought hovering would get it for me, but
yep, 1 sec.
Appreciate it.
So if you zoom in, just click on a link on the road.
Thank you.
The Sheffield. That's fine as well. It's funny, I actually tested this before we started this.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
No worries. So this does a little bit of the same thing, right? So this one is specifically looking at speed limits. And so pass it along, and within the objects, there is a speed limit that's being passed along for every one of these links. So you can start seeing some difference when you get to a smaller road as you hover on top. I think there
And
is
that
about-
return is because that's what was asked for, right? And the next thing we're going to look at is actually layers and attribution. So depending on what you're looking for, right, this just happens to be an example looking for speed limits, but it's a case in point.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a little bit of a bug that's lacking this current demo. But again, we can see the same behavior in the other one.
Okay, appreciate it. I didn't want to burn time as I as I struggled there. So let me go back to sharing here. What we're going to look at next is basically what we call our a PDE or platform data extension. As we keep referring to, right, the map is broken down into tiles, right? So just think the world is chopped up into boxes, right? And that's how you effectively build a map. But within each of those boxes, when you've got, as you can imagine, more than 1,000 attributes, how do you organize that? How do you use it appropriate for a given use case without being overwhelmed? And that's why the further hierarchical look at this is layers. So we talk about ADAS a lot, cardo lines. We could do it by, driven by census information, lane specific information, lane attributes, etc. So when you look at any one of these given layers, let's just take ADAS for functional class, and some of you may be familiar, some may not. Roads are typically assigned a functional class, right? And we look at 1 through 5 and think of, bypasses or limited access roads, highways, tollways, etc. Those tend to fall into the functional class 1 and 2. If you're more fixated on an urban setting, you're going to probably be looking at functional class 3 through 5. So if we look at and just drill into this particular layer for functional class 4, you start to see what link attribute information you have available to you. So from height to slope to elevation, etc., headings, curvature within the roadway, that has implications in autonomous driving. And again, this is just an example, but within each of these layers, you have attributes. So the idea here is to just clarify that there's a hierarchy. So as overwhelming as the amount of information can be, if you understand the hierarchy a little bit and have some sense of what you're looking for, you might very well be able to speed up your process. So again, an area, and we provide the links here, so it may be worth your time to dig in and look at the layers at a high level and drill in. You may find that leveraging that Maps API, Map Attributes API is advantageous to your project. So with that said, how we're doing? We're doing pretty good on time. Going to look at the routing demo here. I'll stop for just a second and see if anybody's got any questions. There's one in the chat. Let's see. I have to jump off the call. This is very cool. That was Paul. All right. Well, we'll record the rest of it for Paul, and you can review it later. So I'm going to do a couple things with the routing demo. Again, we're going to keep it fairly basic. As noted before, I tend to fixate. I'll use Soldier Field as an example. I'm a huge Bears fan, good, better, otherwise, and I apologize for the Lions fans out there. You guys are probably gonna have a better team this year than we are, so be it. Couple ways to do this, and this is basic routing of origin to destination, point A to point B. Right, so you could populate this manually, or you can do a simple search. For the demonstration purposes right now, I'll go ahead and do a search. And again, back to our GS7 or geocoding and search, right? Because I searched for Soldier Field, it knew where it was, not because of the name, but because of a backend database that says, oh, I know where that's at. I know this point of interest, and here are the geocoordinates. So it highlights Soldier Field for me. So rather than try to populate or figure out what the lat long is, I'm going to go ahead and route from. So this becomes my starting point. Now I will search for, this is the exact same example I did last time, so I'll do it again, but I'm going to search for Chicago O'Hare International Airport. And it finds O'Hare, Chicago, Illinois, United States. So when I select that, it finds O'Hare Airport. So I'll just right click on this POI here and say, I want to route to. I've already selected my route from, and it calculates the route. I'll shrink this a little bit so you can see the path. So it's basically taking us from the downtown area to O'Hare International. And it's going to return information you'll see on the right side here. So it's giving us a summary. And the summary is based on some of the conditions we set on the left side. We'll look at those a little bit. Don't have a lot of time to drill into them, but do want you to see some of the capabilities that may influence what you guys do with your demos and projects. But it provides a summary in terms of duration. And this happens to be in a vehicle. Clearly, if we were walking or taking a bicycle, it would exceed 38 minutes. It also provides you effectively what the maneuvers are within the given route. You can scroll down and see which way it's taking you. And this will change as you adjust parameters and or restrictions to your navigation guidance. It does provide turn-by-turn action. Why is that? Is there no result? Probably because we didn't select turn-by-turn somewhere. Did I already fly by it? I want it to turn-by-turn action. So as I click this, we'll see that populated in a bit more detail. So good chance to go back to this left side. I'm going to hide this for a minute, just so we can see what some of the parameters are that you can populate. Right. So we've got our lat longs here that have been populated based on our geocoding and search integrated API to the routing algorithm. We've asked for what it's returning, but there's some things that, like for example, mode of transportation. Right. It's going to default to car, but if you were walking, let's bring this guy back up. How long would it take if we were walking? It'd take a little less than pretty much a full day, right? 7 hours and change. If we were taking a truck, now we might have to take a different path based on truck restrictions, and you get the idea, and so on and so forth in terms of mode of transportation. You can also decide whether you want it to be the shortest path. Maybe you're low on the gas tank, or the fastest because I'm running late. So those are examples of parameters. And again, truck attributes, right? If you want to put limitations, and you can see how this consumption model or these triggers would be very important for a company doing business, right? We've got this truck that weighs X amount. It's got this height. Et cetera. And we want to make sure that we don't violate those or get our trucker stuck under a viaduct, et cetera. Additionally, you can also stipulate timing, right? So, and this is where traffic aware routing, among other things, come in. You might decide you want to go now, or I want to depart at a given time, or I want to arrive at a given time. You can populate those metrics. We also, and this is a very hot and developing space in terms of EV parameters, EV charge aware parameters. The route may dynamically change because the battery's getting low on the vehicle, et cetera. We're not going to get into that for the purposes of this demonstration, but you start to get a sense of the granularity and capability of the routing API and some of the conditions you can set. Last but not least, before we jump to Iceline, you can also say, you know what, I want to avoid a toll road. Let's see if that does anything here. It didn't. So it took us on a path that didn't have tolls. Maybe I'm adverse to all things water, and so I check ferry. I don't want to have to take a ferry, etc. You can also avoid an area based on a bounding box. So if I were to, should let me draw, right? Let's see, I thought I could draw that in here, Jonathan. There's a left click. Let's see, add a void area. So as I do this, my route dynamically changes. So you get the idea. There's a lot of ways to manipulate the results or the return. So I see we're creeping up there on time. I'm going to go ahead though and add Iceline routing, because I do think this is a particularly valuable use case. So we're going to go ahead and stick with, let's go back to Soldier Field, sort of a downtown example, which will be kind of consistent with the Detroit use cases here. So we've highlighted Soldier Field, and I'm going to go ahead and set this as an origin. Iceline routing, as discussed earlier, and again, a lot of documentation on it. It can be driven by time, distance, or all of the above. So let's just start with I used time last time, I'll do it this time. It's asking for a value in seconds. If I populate 10 minutes or 600 seconds, it's going to show you how far you can go. And again, transportation mode is relevant. This is going to shrink dramatically if I decide the transportation mode is pedestrian. So how far can I walk? We'll have to zoom in because that polygon shrunk significantly, right? So truck, we changed a little bit too, right? So you get the idea here. What's kind of cool about this this demo is it also allows you, I'm going to add yet another window. I'm going to take another instance of Iceline routing. Actually, let me go back to this first guy. I'm going to change it to car just to have some consistent examples. And if I were to double the time, so now I've got 20 minutes to work with. How far can I go? And it would be most helpful if I set the origin. I think I made that same mistake last time, if I'm not mistaken. So car, 1200 seconds, Soldier Field. I don't think it changed the last one. I think we're still looking at car, 600. The red one is smaller than it should be because it's distance, not time. Now you're going to see doubling. And interesting dynamic here that you can pick up on, right? As you get out of the confines of the city, where you don't have, the open roadways, expressways, etc., it's not like it exactly doubled, right? It takes context into play here. So by doubling the time, we far more than doubled the reach. That might not be the case from a pedestrian standpoint or even a truck mode of transportation, but you get the idea of what you can do here. And maybe it starts to stimulate some thought process around back to the use cases for this particular hackathon, which is health and, urban wellness, if you will, and potentially even targeted to underserved communities. So how far you can walk to get medical care or how far you need to walk, right? Maybe you can isolate areas that might not have services available to the extent it should, or opportunities, if you will. So with that said, and about 9 minutes left, I'm going to stop and we'll offer some time for anybody that's got questions and go from there.
Well,
Do
thank
we
you.
have any questions?
Thanks, Steve. Thanks,
Sure.
Jonathan. Looks like we had a couple new people join in. Does anyone have any final questions for folks at here?
And again, it was very fast, but if you look at the resources link where you register for the hackathon, you'll see the presentations we shared. They have all the links, including how to create an account, links to the demos. Yeah, so wealth of information.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Haydar. I have a quick question for you guys. Could we have the recording of this meeting as well, just like the previous meeting?
Yes, this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the hackathon website as well.
Oh, that would be great. And I'm sorry, I joined the meeting very late. And so for the innovation, the only question is that, are you asking us to come up with a new idea / platform and development of it, or just the idea and or the patent is enough?
Mark, I don't know if you want to address that. I think there's a fair amount of flexibility being afforded. The idea is, innovation towards an end goal, and whether you're a strong developer and actually build an application or have the construct of an idea, even if it's not vetted or developed fully to an application, I think that's perfectly acceptable. Mark, I don't know if you want to speak to the judging rubric, the criteria.
Yeah, so
competition.
If you're not, if you don't have the skills to fully develop an application or website, the technical skills to do that, you can bring an idea or concept. But it needs to be fully sort of fleshed out be able to explain it in a pitch, create some slides to present it, even providing somewhat of a visual demonstration in the slides if possible, to really score enough points to potentially win something. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and is the idea going to be integrated in the Here platform, or is just a standalone idea so we can just think freely without thinking about Here?
You can think freely, but we want a transportation thought process integrated into whatever you're developing, whatever your idea is. It's about using location services. You don't necessarily have to use the Here platform, as much as we encourage people to do that as they are a partner on this event. We want location and transportation to sort of be that forefront concept of whatever innovative idea that you are coming up with. And then, potentially, depending on what that idea is, Steve and Jonathan and the folks at Here may want to take that on and run with that, but that'll be up to them.
And worth mentioning, any ideas that come from this, if you've got an idea, that's your intellectual property, not ours. So again, our idea here is to not only evangelize our capabilities, but really try to help you guys stimulate ways to, benefit your communities. The point is that even if you use our content and services to build out an idea and or an application, that's your application.
I see. I'm sorry for a couple of questions that I have. So if the idea needs some logistic, like some APIs that doesn't exist right now, or it's not available right now, could we mock it? I mean, could we put a mock repository for the APIs and just say that, hey, if this exists, we could do this, and this platform could work like this. You know what I'm saying? Like, just have some assumptions. If like some, that's it.
That would be acceptable.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great questions.
Questions? Either regarding the Here platform and services or anything about the hackathon event itself?
I'm sorry, do we have the Here's API as well available, or is just available in your own web services? I mean, like if I want to use it as a third party for hackathon, because your map is a single page application, and I guess that it's using the web APIs or RESTful APIs. Could we use its capabilities for drawing the map or the rest of the thing, or you'd rather us to use the OpenStreetMap or like Leaflet, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly our APIs are looking at our map content, and there's nothing stopping you from using the host of what we shared over the last hour in terms of developing your application. With that said, you're by no means obligated to leverage Here, or if there's a service, that Here doesn't provide, knock yourself out, right? You mentioned OSM, and, you're not going to point to OSM with our services, and Jonathan, you may want to chime in here, but I don't think the idea precludes that, or the competition certainly doesn't preclude using any resources available. And to that end, SEMCOG and the city of Detroit are also partnering with their open data portals for you to source content and potentially marry into some of these concepts. So I think the guidance would be, don't feel any limitation to you have to use this or you can't use that. I just think in terms of integrating, right, understand there's probably going to be some limitations. In other words, if you wanted to try to do Iceline routing with Here's API against OSM's map, probably ain't going to play nice.
Yeah, thank you for your complete answer, actually. Thank you.
Sure.
We got about 2 minutes left. If anyone has any other questions. All right, with that, thank everyone for joining us today. This video and any additional slides or information we need to share will be posted on the hackathon website. We'll try to get that up as early as Monday for you to reference, and we look forward to you joining us for the hackathon on May 4th and 5th.